Alright, guys, what is up? It's Pokey Heat. I'm gonna be telling you a story about the Zodiac. Not the Zodiac from San Francisco that terrorized them from 1968 to 1969. I'm talking about the one from the 90s in New York that you probably don't know about. Now, this one begins on May 31st, 1990. Now, I'm telling you this story from watching the docuseries Catching Killers, Season 3, Night Terror. Basically, the show is just a love letter to the cops, to be 100% honest, which is all well and good, but there's a lot that's missing from the actual story, and I had to give a side goog too. So basically, we start with Detective Mike. Walks into the room where he's about to get interviewed. Nice tailored suit, super Brooklyn, like, yeah, my name is Mike, I want to be a cop, like, just like that, okay? So he tells us that on May 31st, 1990, a senior citizen was shot. Now, Mike was part of this crimes against senior citizens thing. Now, New York has precincts, okay? Precincts cover blocks, a few blocks. Now, city blocks are enormous if you don't know, okay? So a lot. Like in a city block, there could be basically a small town in that city block plus some. So he comes to the scene. This poor guy, he's older, Joe. He lived in a basement apartment. He was walking to his home and he sees that someone's following him. Now, when I say Joe's old, he's about 74 and he walks with a cane, okay? Walking home, he sees this guy following him. He turns to him in typical New York fashion is like, I ain't got no money. And then boom, he gets shot. Now, Joe has bad eyesight, so unfortunately couldn't give a description. And yes, I said description. They actually got to interview him because he lived. So they're looking at the crime scene. Joe was obviously taken to the hospital. They find a jacket, so they shake the jacket out, and a note falls out, and, surprise, surprise, a bullet. Somehow the bullet stayed there. So they open the note, and it says, this is the Zodiac. The 12 signs will die. Blah, 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 blah. Right? Here's the note. So he looks at it and he's like, the Zodiac? And of course, in his brain, he's like, this is my moment. This is the Zodiac from San Francisco. So he goes and sends that off to San Francisco to be like, hey, can you match the handwriting? Is this the same guy? They also take the bullet to ballistics. And ballistics is like, hey, there's no grooves on this bullet. And basically tell him it's a zip gun. I've never heard of a zip gun ever in my life. This is a zip gun. It's basically a pipe. It's a homemade gun. A pipe with a rubber band with a nail or something like that they shoot people with. That's insane, okay? So he hears back from San Francisco. San Francisco's like, sorry, my guy. That's not the same person. It's not him. So Joe's like, okay. So someone just claiming to be the Zodiac. Mike claiming to be the Zodiac. So Mike is like, is there fingerprints? No fingerprints, nothing. Then we cut to a Brooklyn detective calls Mike and says, hey, the Post here, the New York Post here got a letter. And the letter is basically taking responsibility for more murders that they had no clue about. Now, they had a clue about, but didn't see a connection or anything like that because there was no letters or anything like that. And we find out about these two, and they're just as feeble as the first guy who was older. So the one guy, Roscoe, he was the first one. He had a disability, and it made him walk with a limp. The shooter comes up from behind him, shoots him in the back, puts the zip gun to his head, and then looks at him and runs away. The guy had a mask on, so Roscoe obviously didn't get anything. Then the second guy, Montenegro, was super drunk. Wasted, stumbling, wasted. Guy runs up from behind him, no clue, shoots him in the chest. Boom, falls down, but he survives. Both these guys survive, which is crazy. They said, the shooter thought that he killed him, but he didn't. I think the shooter really, just could not do it. But to attack feeble people, that's disgusting. So again, no fingerprints. And basically the letters we're all talking about Orion and the Seven Sisters. So stuff Mike is oddball stuff we don't know about. So they bring in Detective Larry. He is my favorite, okay? This is Larry. Okay, this is Larry now. This is Larry back then. This man found the mustache for him and he stuck with it all these years. I love you, Larry. So Larry, goes into the offbeat stuff, as Mike says, in astrology and astronomy. They go to an astronomer and he's like, oh, on all three of these murders, these constellations were in the sky. And it matches to what he's saying in the letters. So in the letters, too, it had a little pie chart with the different astrological signs. And all that. So Larry gets into this deep, right? And he finds out that these three constellations were visible during the times of the shooting, and that it's a 21-day cycle. And they figure out that the next 21-day cycle is June 21st between 1 and 4 a.m. Those constellations will be in the sky. So they run and rush to the chief, and they're like, Chief, this is when the murder is going to happen. Now I'll give it to them. I've never heard of them predicting murders unless it's like Minority Report. So they did a great job with that. Like, Larry killed it. So, of course, they flood the streets with cops that night in Brooklyn and Queens. Now, New York is, Brooklyn, Queens, Long Island, Manhattan, especially Manhattan. Like, Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, they're all right there. Literally right there. Train ride away. Like, literally, I'm from New York. I lived in New York. Super easy to get to, okay? So, we meet another guy that ends up being part of the task force that they end up putting together, the watchdogs or whatever. And basically, I don't really like this guy. He shows us his tattoos. I didn't even write his name down because, I just did not like him. Anyway, he has tattoos, he says, on his back of John Wayne Gacy and Jeffrey Dahmer. He has nothing to do with those murders. He's a detective, nothing to do with those. He just wants them on his back. And then he also has the OG Zodiac symbol on his wrist. Dude, you're doing too much. You want to be a part of everything. Anyway, so he tells us we were hunting that night. And basically that they frisked and stopped everybody that was out on the street that night. So they just harassed all of Brooklyn and Queens. And Mike is like, well, this is verbatim, by the way. Now it would be considered a gross violation of civil rights. Mike, it was considered that back then, too. You just didn't care. Anyway, nothing happens in Queens or Brooklyn. But surprise, surprise, they get a call from a detective in Manhattan and says, nothing happened in Brooklyn and Queens, right? Yeah, because someone got shot in Central Park. Bro. It's a train ride away. Why did no one think to cover Manhattan? Seriously? You doing all this for Queens and Brooklyn, do it for Manhattan too, bro. It's a train ride away. I think you can walk there too. Come on. So anyway, we find out about the poor victim. He basically was the homeless man who was trying to go to sleep, and the guy ran up on him and shot him while he was trying to sleep. That's horrible. But thankfully he survives. So the task force at this point was permitted and officially put together, the watchdogs, whatever. And they instantly go into a satanic panic. Now, back in the 90s, this was a real thing where, the occult and these Satan worshipers, and they're out here to kill everybody. So this is what they thought it was because the astrology and the symbols and blah, 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 blah. So, basically, they don't really have anything. So Larry kind of dives deeper into it, and he finds out about this guy Crowley and these followers, and he talks to this voodoo wizard warlock guy. I think his name was the Warlock. This is him, okay? As you can see, he's talking to Larry. Larry was recording this. He's being choked out by a snake while telling him about Crowley, this guy Crowley and his followers, and all this extra crap and whatever, okay? So Larry gets freaked out, okay? Freaked out. And I don't blame him. He's diving deep into this stuff. He's working long hours, trying to figure this out. His wife is like, my man, you look pale. Are you okay? He talks about going around, driving around his house and everything because he was scared people were following him. A whole thing, okay? So, the Zodiac actually effed up. And the letter that he left at that last crime scene had a partial fingerprint. So Mike likes to tell us that they didn't have computers like that. And literally this fingerprint you had to take and then try to match to other pieces of paper with fingerprints on it. That is horrible, okay? So they're like, all right, we're going to wait for another 21-day cycle because nothing's coming from the fingerprints. And then boom, July 12th, 21 days later, they expand it to Manhattan. Nothing happens. All these cops, all this money, nothing happens. Then boom, 3 months go by and nothing happens and still no match to the fingerprints. So the task force is then disbanded in November 1990. So not that long after, which kind of sucks. So then we fast forward in this show, and it basically in 1992, Mike leaves. There's no arrest. 94, nothing. So like we jumped from 92 to 94, right? With no progress, no nothing. So then we meet this guy, and his name is Detective or Sergeant Joe. His nickname is Pork Chop, so I shall be referring to him as Pork Chop. He kind of reminds me of Porky Pig. He says he's called Pork Chop because he likes to eat food. I love it. So in August 3rd, 1994, he's a cop in East New York, Brooklyn, and he receives a letter. And the letter is basically like, it says like, sleep my little dead and all this crap, like just creepy stuff. And it basically has all these murders that he's taking credit for, and he's saying that it's the Zodiac from all long ago, blah, 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 whatever. He says in 1992, he stabbed a woman, so shot and stabbed. Again, they weren't looking for stabbings, they were looking for just shootings. And the detective also tells us, Pork Chop tells us, this woman was stabbed over 100 times. So if she was shot, there was no way they were going to figure out. That's horrible. All in this park, okay? 1993, a guy was shot, and he says that he fled into a nearby cemetery. And when I say he, I mean the killer writing this note. A homeless man bled out. 1993, he shot a woman. She survived, though. Goes on and on. There was one that they could not find the body. Like, they went to this park where he said it was, and they could not find it. So, basically, this guy's MO changed. And obviously, police departments at that time weren't really talking to. I don't know that they still, if they do now, but they really didn't talk to each other that much or give proper information. And they also had over 2,300 murders. Okay, so that's a lot of murders, trying to connect all these crimes and things, and this guy's over here stabbing people. So anyway, Pork Chop tells us that, because of that, he basically, another task force is started, and there was a code on there, much like the original Zodiac, but this one was maritime flags, and they easily cracked the code, and it basically said, like, this is the Zodiac, I'm in control, blah, 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 right? So Pork Chop is one of the supervisors in charge of this task force, and he figures out that all these murders that he's taking credit for, and one of the original, or two of the original ones, were in this triangle of an area. So they send people out, a mile this way, a mile that way from each of these crimes. And they come up with about 4,500 people that they have to manually check the fingerprint, the partial that they have too. Nothing comes out of it at all. And it goes cold once again. But a year later, June 18, 1996, Pork Chop is now a hostage negotiator. And on this day, he is talking down a guy who is holding his sister's boyfriend hostage. And he shot his sister in the butt, mind you. Like, I had to look that up, by the way. They didn't say that, but they did say, like, yeah, she shot her, but she got shot in the butt and then ran to a neighbor where she called the cops. That's insane. Okay, shout out to her. The boyfriend, she ran out the door, the boyfriend ran to the back. And now this guy, Eddie, her brother, is holding him hostage. Pork Chop is able to talk him down. They arrest him. And at the scene, they find 2 pipe bombs, okay, and a confession note. And he reads the confession note, and Pork Chop is reading it and realizes that one of the symbols looks just like, and the handwriting looks just like the Zodiac that he had studied. He said, like, he knew it like his wife's, grocery list. Like, he knew it. So they go and they talk to this guy, Eddie. And at first, Eddie's like, I don't know what you're talking about. They show him the letters, they show him the fingerprint, they show him all this stuff, and he, like, including this crime scenes. And Porkchop says, like, he's looking back and forth, and he says, all right, I'll tell you everything. And this guy confesses and tells them everything. He goes through each one, and he's telling them, like, exactly what happened, exactly what he left, how he did it, all that stuff. So they just talk about that, right? Mike's upset that he just never, got to finish it, and blah, 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 and all this stuff. And then the last thing we get is just on-screen text, and it says, on June 24th, 1998, Eddie is convicted of 3 counts of murder and 6 attempted, okay? And he was sentenced to 232 years. Now, that wasn't enough for me. I was like, I need to know more. Like, you guys just, like, told me how we got to closing the case, even though you sped through stuff. It was mainly about the cops. Okay. I need to know, like, what else happened? Like, what other evidence did you have? Like, how did this go down? So basically, they say, like, early childhood life, Eddie was described as being obsessed with death and astrology, which led to his obsession with the original zodiac. And this is why this guy copied him, okay? He was 26 at the time of his capture, which means he was 20 years old when he first shot somebody. That is insane. He was expelled from school because he brought a gun to school. They tried to say, like, yeah, you come back to school, whatever, we'll work with you. And he just decided not to. He never had a job. He lived with his mom. He basically paid for his phone, like, their phone bill and, like, some extra stuff by stealing from money from vending machines. He was mentally and physically abusive to his half-sister, who he later shot. Some of the evidence that was used during the trial was the tools to make that zip gun, which is terrifying, where, like, the tool marks from it were traced back to tools he had. There was DNA found on the stamps because the dummy licked them. So they found his DNA on the stamps that were used to send the letters. Then during the trial, this guy Eddie was screaming and shouting just random stuff. The judge had to basically tell him to shut the hell up or get out of my court. So yeah, they suspected that, that he was taking these people's IDs to get their birthdays, because all of these people were in that specific zodiac that he looked for, and he was just, like, collecting zodiacs. So before they caught him, he had 8 people with all different zodiac signs: Gemini, Scorpio, Taurus, all that. And these people he had no connection to. So he basically stole stuff from them, whatever. Yeah, so that is the crazy story. He's still in jail. He is 55. He is in upstate New York. Another little side goog. In 1994, he was actually arrested with the zip gun. But after it didn't work, the Popo was like, we'll let you go. So just proving the point that, like, nobody was communicating, nothing. Because if somebody was caught with a zip gun, don't you think Mike or Porkchop or one of them would have known that? Like, would have liked to hear that? That's not a very common thing, clearly. So yeah, you guys let me know what you think of this story. I think it's nuts. I actually did not know about a New York Zodiac or this guy. He's still alive, which is crazy. I know that he's done interviews with people, which is a little scary. I'm not going to watch it because I will not support a murderer. But the victims, that's horrible that happened to them. So they're the ones that matter. But anyway, so I hope you guys enjoyed this story, this video. I got some pretty good hits. I hit the Iono. Right here, this is a Mimikyu box from 2017, I think. It had these 3 packs that I really wanted to open. I never opened them before. And as you can see, it went great. XY error, yay. Yeah, it didn't go great, guys. Spoiler alert, this one doesn't go great, just like the others. It sucks because I really wanted to open these packs. It was a good code card, I think, but I don't think that matters. But anyway, these are my hits that I got out of it. Pikachu again, some other really nice ones that I love. So guys, just let me know what you think of this video, this story. I hope you enjoyed. Have a great day.